Years in the making, property tax reform has finally been signed into state law. The reform comes in several pieces.
The first one is that cities and counties who want to raise their tax revenues from property taxes more than 3.5% have to ask voters first. School districts have to ask at 2.5%.
Texas Tribune executive editor Ross Ramsey explains that does not mean changing your rates.
If they limited your tax rate, then your taxes could still go up because of property value increases if your property got more valuable. So instead of doing that, they just limit the amount of money that a particular government can bring in from property taxes and say if that amount of money goes up more than 3.5%, and it's not due to growth in the district, but it's due to either higher tax rates or higher property appraisals, then they have to ask voters if it's okay to spend that money.
The answer is they have to live within your means as the taxpayer.
Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick says it's bringing the public into the decision-making process much earlier. Current law didn't allow voters to get involved until tax revenues were increased 8%. So 3.5% is a big drop. That was one point of tension during the legislative process.
But when you go to cities and counties, especially in fast-growing areas, they say, look, we have to keep up with growth for streets, for police, for fire, for all of these things. And a really low number, a really low limit on our ability to raise the money to pay for the things that people need is going to make it hard to do those things and hard to serve people in the way that they want to be served.
On the other side,
there are some places where these taxes just aren't growing that fast, or where people are so conservative that the local officials have just said, put us under the limit, we don't mind.
Because the bottom line is these percentages don't mean the money will automatically be spent. It just means when the entity wants to spend that money, they have to ask for the public's permission. School districts will prompt voter approval at an even smaller rate, 2.5%. And that's because half their funding comes from the state.
So if they limit the local ability to raise money, the state government steps up with the money, and so they felt like they were safe doing it.
The next piece of reform was praised by all. It mandates more transparency, clearing up confusion for taxpayers.
A thing that'll go on your bill that'll say basically, here's what your rate is now, here's what it would be under what they proposed, and here's the level at which you get to involve yourself as a voter in this thing.
Ramsey calls the reform package a work in progress. Progress being the key word.
This is a very complex area, and I'm sure they're going to find something that they go whoops and come back in 2021 and try to fix. The idea here is that voters can watch it more carefully and control it a little bit better, and we'll see as we go forward how well that actually works.
It's also important to mention a caveat in this reform that helps smaller rural areas, where 2.5 or 3.5% of revenue is a tiny number, not near enough to buy something like a new fire truck. In those cases, there is a $500,000 limit that a small entity would be able to spend without asking voter approval. But if they exceed $500,000, it goes on the ballot.